Welcome to the Path Podcast, where we will travel the lives of some bold women, from dreams to detours to destiny. She did not choose this path. This path chose her. This is the Path Podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of the Path Podcast. It is just you and I sitting on the couch today. On today's show, I will give you the 411 on what the podcast is about, what to expect, and the vision I have for everyone who spends their valuable time with me and my guests. And I will share a little bit about me. Currently, the show will run bi-weekly, discussing the paths of some bold women who have overcome major obstacles. Some of the shows are broken up into two parts because just like life, when real healing takes place, you cannot just brush over the full extent of what these sisters endured to get to where she is today. So we will run a continuation, a part 2 of sort, the following week. We hope you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Here's what you can expect from each guest. I will be interviewing some of the boldest women you would ever meet. You may know some of them. They're our neighbors. They're our mothers and our sisters, our daughters, our nieces. They're all over and they're all around you, I'm sure. At some point on her path, she endured an obstacle that impacted and changed the course of her life. We will start out discussing their earliest memories of the dreams she had for her life. Then we'll move into the moment she experienced some trauma, tragedy, or disappointment that forced her to detour. Detour from what she thought her life would look like. Not only did she endure these obstacles, she did the inner work, growing into an authentic self, finding her voice that moved her into destiny and purpose. She did not choose this path. This path chose her. Let her give you what I call the Path's survival guide to overcoming the loss of a child, moving past a divorce, to dealing with a diagnosis, to the loss of a business, career, and ultimately financial setbacks. We will have professionals also come in and speak on overcoming obstacles in order to help us move past those stuck places and traumas that is causing some of us not to live in our full potentials. It is my vision that every experience and insight given on this podcast will motivate, encourage, and change the lives of everyone to live the life that God intended for them. And if you find yourself stuck, that you will hear how these women took these obstacles thrown at them and turned them into opportunities filled with purpose and destiny. And if you can relate to any story discussed here, that you would know that you are not alone. So now let's get into a little bit about me. I was born and raised in a very small, close-knit community called Rivers Hill in South Carolina. If you have ever seen Rivers Hill on the map and you're not from that area, you must have a relative that lives there. That's the only thing small about it, though, because the love of family was not small or lacking at all. I am the talkative baby girl of my parents' 3 children. I have an amazing daughter who I will get into later. Besides, my story revolves around her. Those closest to me know me to be a very positive person, a lover of people and seeing everyone succeed at life, and an overall private person. If I had to choose what to talk about, it would not have been my personal life or asking others about theirs. I've always been someone drawn to a good Cinderella story. If I'm watching basketball, I root for the underdog, the number 8 team winning against the number 1 team. I can enjoy real life stories of everyday men and women who overcame obstacles. Just sit and talk to those closest to you. Those that inspire us are right in our homes. The path is not about your destiny and purpose producing wealth and notoriety for you, although I hope that is your story, but it's about finding your voice, your authentic self, and making the best out of the life you have in spite of those obstacles. Along with those Cinderella stories are those great comeback stories. Sarah Jakes Roberts, for those who know her, the daughter of popular Bishop T.D. Jakes, spoke about her obstacles. Her father's popularity, faith, and money couldn't stop the course of her path to become the woman we all know her to be today. Sarah has told her story in her book, Lost and Found, Finding Hope in the Detours of Life, where she gave birth to her son at 13, got married at 19, had a second child at 20, and divorced at 23. She was shunned at school and gossiped about at church with low self-esteem and depression. She says she wrote the book to help explain her journey from shame to acceptance to success. Sounds like the women here on the path. You may say, well, she has $1 million father, so how can she relate to other single mothers who's experienced divorce? She said this, and I so agree with it. There is no level of life that you don't have shame, that you don't carry guilt. She stated in an interview, it wasn't until she was in her darkest moment that she realized she only had two options, settle or evolve. And evolve she did, because she transformed from the insecure and fearful young girl into the powerhouse wife, mother, businesswoman, and leader she is today. She is now a force to be reckoned with. Now, to me, her daddy didn't make her an insecure teen mother, and her daddy didn't transform her into the powerhouse she is today. That came from being broken and doing the internal work. Her story is no different than many of the women you will hear here. There's a quote by John McDonnell that says, every problem introduces a person to himself. What an insight. Each time we encounter a painful experience, we get to know ourselves a little better. Our past don't always take us the route we would have chosen for ourselves, but it will always put us back on the right path. When I talk about obstacles, the first one I can remember clearly was when my mother passed when I was 12 years old. No child expects to lose a mother. During that time, my father's siblings and I were surrounded by so much family that it helped us cope and grieve this huge loss. Little did I know, 28 years later, I would return that same love and support to my godson, who was 12 years old at the time when he lost his mother, who was my best friend and my sister. We don't always understand why we have to go through some things in life, but I've learned that all things, even the loss of my mother, work together for good, even when it's still hard to understand. What was good, you say? The good is what I learned in that process. The people that God placed in my life, like my aunts and all the other people that helped, it helped me know what to do for my godson. And again, he was exactly the same age. If I move forward to college, and when I graduated from college, I moved to Atlanta and got married to my college boyfriend. I can say, yes, we were way too young, but we got married. We were doing what young couples do, work hard, hanging out, and partying. I think we were forever at a house party, wedding, baby shower, or cookout every weekend. I'm more of a homebody, but enjoy that time because I enjoyed it. It was in my 20s because the people we were with were great people. Life was good, and around year 9, we decided it's time to start a family. I became pregnant, and while in my first trimester, we went on vacation with several other couples. And around our second or third day there, not to put too much out there, but I went to the bathroom, not feeling any type of way, just a normal, went normally to the bathroom and noticed blood. I wasn't in any pain, but I knew that wasn't normal. We went to a nearby hospital where we were. They checked me out and said everything was okay. We called my doctor, made an appointment, and we decided to try to start making our trip back to Georgia. We broke the trip up into two two parts. We didn't take the whole trip back because we drove to our location. When we arrived at our appointment that Monday morning, nothing would have prepared me for what would come next. The ultrasound technician blurted, "Oh, there's nothing in there," as she continuously kept looking at the monitor and moving the Doppler around in my stomach, searching for a heartbeat, never looking at us and forgetting, it seems, that you have new parents sitting here. Needless to say, I was devastated because, unfortunately, there was nothing left in my sack. And I cried the entire day and the days after. And yes, I complained to my doctor about the technician, because no matter how many times she's seen these cases, she has to treat every case as it's the very first one. She shouldn't say that to any parent. I don't care if that's their third or fourth child. So no couple should ever have to hear anything like that way. We had a great doctor, who I am still with to this day, who reassured me and us that we shouldn't be too concerned about trying to get pregnant again. As reassuring as it sounds, our mind still plays tricks on us, wondering what happened. Did I do something wrong? Or could I have prevented this? But as time went on, I realized there was nothing I could do about it. There's a quote by Bruce Lee I've read that says, "Life is like flowing water. Life is a perpetual movement. There's nothing fixed about it." What is that saying? Basically, we have to keep moving. We can't get stuck or stay stuck in something traumatic when it happens in our lives. We did what the doctor advised. I gave my body time to heal from the trauma of the miscarriage, and we tried again once our doctor approved it. It's crazy to explain, but once you've made up in your mind that you want to have a baby, there's something that kicks in, and it puts our maternal instincts into overdrive. And now the sex of the baby doesn't matter. It's just that we want a healthy baby. Bump everything else. Thankfully, we didn't have any issues, and less than a year and a half later, we gave birth to a healthy, beautiful little girl. Being a mom was wonderful. It was wonderful. Our daughter is a very calm person to this day, but she was a very calm baby, which made it easy for us. Around a year later, it was the morning of Thanksgiving. We were at my sister's house. We drove 2 hours the night before because we were planning on going to my father's house for Thanksgiving dinner and to stay a few days, like we always do. As I was feeding our daughter, my husband at the time and I were having a casual conversation. I don't recall what it was about, but later it turned into something related to having a second child. As I was talking, out of nowhere, my then husband responded, "I'm not sure I want more children." The pause you hear here is just what I did. I was looking at him sideways like, what? I don't understand. I stopped feeding our daughter and asked, "What did you say?" I was shocked. Like, where was this coming from? I don't recall the two of us discussing having one child and that's it. I felt like my heart dropped because I instantly knew there was something more to this comment than what was said. What do you do when you feel like something is not right? I don't know about you, but for me, I packed our bags, not to continue the Thanksgiving dinner to my father's, but to head back to Atlanta. Some may ask, was that comment really that serious? That you would not continue with your plans? Yes, it was. I was not overreacting. Some people may want you to think that you are overreacting, but sister, you are the only one that knows what's going on in your home. You know your spouse or partner. You know you are not crazy, and you know when it's time to deal with a problem. It's an old saying, you just know that you know. After packing, I told my sister our plans. And she didn't ask any other questions. She just said, okay, be careful. Thanksgiving Day is a day of family love and togetherness. At that moment, I felt none of that. And what I was not going to do is take my ex-husband around more of my family for us to pretend that we were a happy family. I was supposed to be thankful. And at that time, my heart was confused and uncertain of what was happening. That is one thing I don't do well, is pretend. When it comes to my heart, I don't believe in overlooking problems that are in plain view. Over the years, I've had to learn to be quiet and assess situations before speaking, because the talkative little sister was used to speaking her mind in the moment. Thankfully, I've grown a lot from that. Needless to say, when my ex stated he didn't want more children, he was my husband at the time, it was shocking to me. Now, of course, I believe a partner in a relationship has a right to change their minds when it comes to important topics discussed. But it is also important to have that discussion with your spouse when you start having those feelings, to have honest conversations. There's a good time to say communication is key in a relationship, along with the other million things needed to be successful in a marriage. The outcome still depends on where you and your spouse are in the marriage and how important it is to each person. In my case, it has so much more to do with something else. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I didn't see it heading to divorce either. I didn't start to notice pattern changes until around earlier that summer of that year. It seems as though when we returned to Atlanta that Thanksgiving Day, or that night, by that evening, nothing was the same. What I might have ignored months prior, now it seemed as though it was clear, or maybe I just paid more attention to the changes and finally confronted them. Although we started to discuss our marriage, he wasn't being honest about what was going on and never stated he didn't want the marriage anymore. His actions started to show it. Another thing, I'm big on actions, not words. Sometimes someone can say, I love you all day long, but it's what you show me that makes me feel it. We even had spiritual counseling to help with the issues we were having. And when Christmas came, that's supposed to be one of the most exciting times also of the year. We have this little girl now to share the holidays with, and now it seems like things were falling apart even more. All of this is happening around the same time the world was in a frantic mode, wondering if their computer systems would fail and cause the collapse of civilization in 2000. If you all remember, it was called the Millennium Bug, which led to anxiety and the Y2K scare. For some of you I may be telling my age, but most of you should remember it. If not, look it up. It was a time of excitement, anxiety, and for me, the realization my marriage was in a bad place, nearing the end. Because on New Year's Eve, when the clock struck 12, the world was still standing, thankfully, but at 4720 Vineyard Court, everything was crumbling. My ex had the nerve to stay home long enough to say Happy New Year to his daughter and I, and got dressed and left our home to go out. Out where? Needless to say, this has never happened before. That's when I made up in my mind, no more. He had to go. Let me be clear. I was heartbroken and I was hurt. But along with that hurt was anger that fueled determination. Determination that I would not stay in a marriage with someone that clearly wasn't respecting me and our daughter. I was not going to allow my daughter to see her father come and go in our home and thought that was normal. It was not an easy decision, ladies. When I asked him to leave our home, but there was no other decision I could make at the time, I felt like. Ladies, you do what's best for you and your family. I'm not suggesting you do what I did. You have to be ready for the consequences that come from the decisions you make. It is my prayer that all marriages survive obstacles that come. Because as we know, marriage and relationships are not easy. I'm sure everyone can agree to that. Even though I asked my ex, I still had hopes that we would eventually reconcile. Besides, we have this little girl now, and I knew I didn't want her going from home to home. My ex and I never reconciled. Although I believe infidelity played a part in our divorce, he denies it. He denied it. But if it didn't have to do with that, it had a lot to do with neglect, dishonesty, poor communication, and not taking our vows seriously. Years later, as I've matured, I can look back and see how I wasn't a perfect wife and had a lot of things I could have worked on as well. It always takes two people in a marriage. In order to grow, you have to be honest about the part you played so you can be better moving forward for yourself. Months after I asked my ex to leave, I filed for divorce. I knew we were not getting back together, and it was time to move on. Besides, I felt like he was a stranger to me at that moment. When you felt like you know someone for so long, and then now it feels like they're a stranger, it was no reason for me to hold on to anything. What helped me to deal with all that was going on, I settled in my mind that if I could learn at the age of 12 to live without my mother, the one who I did not want to separate from when I started school, who gave birth to me, if I could learn to live without her, then I could surely get past losing a man. Ladies, I used what I knew that gave me some peace and strength that I would be okay. That, along with the love of my daughter, gave me the strength and ability to move on from the marriage. I found a great lawyer, and because we didn't have a lot of assets to divide, just the normal, the marriage was over in a matter of a couple of months. Sounds simple, but anyone who goes through a divorce knows it's not that simple. It's crazy. You spend so much of your life with someone for a judge to just say in a few words, the marriage is over. But the heart is still attached to a dream that needs to connect with reality. They say divorce is like a death because at least when you lose a loved one, it wasn't because they chose to leave. For me, I think I was mourning more on the hopes and dreams I thought my life should look like. I was happy before I met my ex, and I was determined to be happy without him. This is my story, but yours could end differently. Don't give up on that marriage if you've prayed and received direction from God on what it is you should do. Sister, your marriage can be restored if both of you are 100% vested in restoring it and willing to work at it together. Marriage is about communication and giving. You are there to give, not take. When both people are giving 100% to the other, then no one is lacking anything. After the divorce was finalized, I was determined to be happy. But I was still angry with my ex and what he did to our family. What I felt like he did to our family. How dare you, was my thoughts. How dare you? Most times when we had to have a conversation, it wasn't pleasant. I was still angry with him, so I cursed him out literally every time I spoke to him. Our daughter was a toddler at the time, so I could talk to him freely after I put her to bed. My behavior was not right. Yes, I can say that now, but it sure felt good then. Trust me when I say it adds more stress to your life than you think. With a lot of prayer and more prayer and even more praying, I learned how to work with my ex because I accepted and assessed where we were as a couple and what I knew was most important. And that was showing our little girl two adults that were friends and would always come together as loving parents because she mattered first. That wasn't easy, trust me. That was all the praying I told you I had to do. I can recall my ex telling me he was happy when I stopped cursing at him. My ex wouldn't normally respond back in an argumentative way, but I took it as How could he? He's the one that messed up, not me. But if you knew him, that was his nature. Not argumentative at all. He's a very nice and fun person. I had to learn that wasn't who I am either. And reacting that way was out of my character. As parents, we have to know that although the marriage or relationship ended, when you have kids, that's where the part of the co-parenting continues. Our children should not witness our anger, pain, arguments, and feelings of the other parent. That's the least we can do for our children who did not ask to be placed in this position. Let me be clear again. That is easier said than done. So I am not sitting here professing that it's just do it and be done. But I just have to say that we know our children comes first, and I know they do for all of us. I know it's hard, especially when you've been hurt by someone. You have to draw on what you know to help you deal with your emotions. I drew on my faith in God, and yes, I still question it, because during that time is when I learned that no one sin is bigger than another in God's eyes. Like, really? I really learned that I was, I think, 29, 30 at the time, 30 years old. All these years later, and I'm still amazed by that. So if God forgives me for my sins, who am I not to try and forgive? Even if the person doesn't ask for forgiveness, we have to forgive. I heard someone say the issue is not if he or she deserves to be forgiven. The point is whether or not you feel like you deserve to be free. When I forgave, we were both free, it seems, to just be our daughter's parents, whose number one goal, and it was our number one goal, to just love her. We did all of her birthdays together and all of her major events, and we'll continue. Turns out we were still a family, just not in the sense of what I knew or I thought our family would look like. When life happens, such as divorce, or when we were faced with devastating obstacles, one of the first tips on our survival guide is you have to step back and process what is happening when dealing with any obstacle. Accept what is happening to you. Give what you're feeling a name. If you're angry, call it what it is and ask God to help you with that. Healing is a choice, and it should be intentional, and you should be intentional about it. When we go through trials, we feel alone, but you will discover you are not alone. And if I can come out of it, so can you, because I am no different than you are. Do not compare your chapter 1 with my chapter 20. The quote I read earlier by John MacDonald, where every problem introduces a person to himself, it is so true, because we encounter ourselves when we go through major things in our lives. We get a new perspective of who we are or who we've forgotten we are. Because in my time of sitting back and looking over my life, because I was so determined to do certain things to show that I was going to be okay and give my daughter the best life possible, it reminded me of all the things I love doing that I kind of silenced. Not because no one made me, but I did it myself. And in my reflection time, after losing my mother, the divorce, and one other obstacle I didn't get into here that I would save for another solo episode, is I was laid off 3 times in 4 years after 2008. And that was a story all in itself, but I can see how all things work together for good there as well. Not all things were counted as a loss after my divorce, because out of it came our daughter. You cannot say you go through a divorce and just regret everything. I did not regret everything. For me, I regained part of me also that I silenced, that I mentioned earlier. And I grew as a person. After my layoffs, I realized I no longer wanted to climb the corporate ladder. And I had a purpose that was much bigger than spreadsheets. It is a process to get to the point where you can turn those obstacles into opportunities with purpose, to rediscover your true and authentic selves. That person is in there. You just have to do the work to bring her back. I started this podcast because as I healed, I was much happier in rediscovering my purpose. You are not that obstacle that you're going through or you have gone through. It is how you perceive the obstacle that determines your outcome. It is something that happened to you that you can overcome so you can be who God called you to be. Again, don't get me wrong. When I was going through the obstacles I've gone through, it didn't feel good. No one feels good going through divorce or losing a loved one or a business, or if you're not in that career that you enjoy doing. But when you go through these things, you have to look at it to see what it is that you're supposed to learn from this process. Sometimes it's placing you back on track to be the person who you are supposed to be. The bold women coming on this show will share their stories and share how they're helping others and themselves after going through obstacles in their lives. Some have started nonprofits, businesses, and some rediscovering her true authentic self. So please join us bi-weekly and share with someone who might benefit from our stories. It would be my honor if you stay connected with us. Follow us on Facebook at The Path Podcast and on Instagram at @thepath_podcast so we can stay in touch with each other. So you'll know about our upcoming guests. If you want to be a guest or would like to hear a topic discussed, please email me at thepath4ward@gmail.com. That's thepathforward@gmail.com. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the path of some amazing women like my first guest, who you will hear in the next 2 weeks, share her path when the unthinkable happens due to domestic violence. I won't tell it all because it's her story to tell, her path. How she started a nonprofit that is helping others. She did not choose this path. This path chose her. I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you will follow us bi-weekly and rate and review this podcast. Let me be your sister, your motivator, your confidence builder, one who believes purpose is bigger than obstacles. My crown is not complete until every woman wears her crown confidently. Thank you for joining us again. Until next time, sisters.